Hello remixes and reworks, my name is teasing, and there's a new champion roadmap that's been released by Riot, which is the document that they like to release where they tease new and upcoming champions that will be added to the game later on down the line, as well as detailing the visual and gameplay updates that they're working on. This is something Riot does every once in a while. They do a visual or gameplay update in order to bring a champion into line with the modern state of League of Legends. And something that Riot have been using these visual and gameplay updates to do for quite a while now is to also use them as opportunities to deepen the lore around the game, to explore some aspect of the story of League of Legends that has, been unattended. This is what we saw, for instance, with the Aatrox rework, which was used both to bring, very out-of-date, unpopular champion into a more healthy game state, at least theoretically, but also to do a massive deep dive and a substantial exploration of what the hell the Darkin even are, what they mean to League of Legends, how they interact with the game, like what they're supposed to do, and how is their history, and where did they come from, and how do they fit into the world state and stuff like that. And that's kind of what we're going to be discussing in this video. We're going to be discussing the champions who are up for rework. We're going to be discussing what I would like to see from a visual perspective in terms of their character designs, and what I would like to see in terms of the themes and in terms of the kinds of stories that the champions are being used to tell. Now, if you want a full lore breakdown of exactly what's going on in terms of how it fits into the current lore and lore speculation about, how the champions are going to fit into the world, and also, just general speculation on, kit updates and who the colorful mage might be, and who this mysterious new champion who's being teased with a couple of golden chains on what looks like a Demacian floor, well, I recommend that you go into the description or wait until the end of the video and click on Necrit's breakdown of this same champion roadmap, because he goes into all of those things in a lot more detail than I'm going to do. What I'm going to be doing, instead of speculating about all of that, I'm going to be talking about stuff I would like to see, like things that I would like to see explored, things that I would like to see added to these champions. And we're going to start with the Yeti himself. We're going to start with Nunu, because Nunu is in desperate need of an update, and he has been for a very long time. Nunu has very little to nothing to him. He's one of the few champions who has a substantial amount of lore to him, but he's also a champion who really doesn't have, like, when you look at him in-game, first of all, his character model is ugly as hell. It's absolutely terrible. And secondly, the character, from a gameplay perspective, is absolutely awful, but also has very little theme to him. Like, it's supposed to be this sort of a boy and his Yeti kind of theme going on, where it's about the interaction between these two characters, like that they have a partnership, that they're equal partners and things, and that Nunu is riding around on this Yeti, which is called Willump, and through their partnership, they have been able to gain freedom and roam the Freljord and do their own thing. Like, all of those themes are sort of supposed to be in there, but none of them are, because Nunu is old as hell. Like, it's a very old champion. It has very little in-game anything to it, and its character design is frankly a complete non-descriptive mess. So, what we've seen of Nunu so far is a little gif of Nunu's own hand and Willump kind of doing a cartoony fist bump in a gif on the previous champion roadmap, and that's kind of the direction I would like Nunu to take. Like, I feel very good about the direction that Riot have been teasing for Nunu, that they're gonna play up the whole sort of childish fantasy about being, a young adventurous boy with just this giant-ass Chewbacca companion to back you up, to be your friend, to hang out, to play with, to, join you in your adventures as you romp through the Freljord, having, cool, fun snow adventures and doing fun stuff. Like, that kind of aesthetic, that kind of feel, I like a lot, because it functions essentially as kind of an inversion of the dynamic that... What the hell? Something just happened outside. I don't think anyone crashed, but that was a loud noise. It functions as a kind of inversion of the concept that we have with Annie and Tibbers, where Annie is this very lonely, damaged, terrified, scared, traumatized little girl, for whom Tibbers is kind of an extension of her own emotionality, an extension of her anger, of her disappointment, of her pain that comes out when she's in extreme distress to protect her and destroy everything that she loves. With Nunu, what I would really like to see is a complete inversion of that aesthetic, where it's not, the monster doesn't represent the worst aspects of who Nunu is. The monster is kind of an embodiment of all his good attributes, of his adventurousness, of his kindness, of his playfulness, of his childishness. All these good qualities being embodied in this big hairy monster that he alone understands. Like a boy and his dog, it essentially should be the relationship between them, but, you know, with a little bit more parity and equality. That's some stuff I'd like to see there. And in terms of the characters, I would very much like to see Nunu's own size increased relative to Willump, like so that he has, from a size perspective, that he's not just this tiny little gnat, this ant person sitting on Willump's shoulders that you can kind of barely see, but that he's actually a recognizable and distinguishable character model within it. Then I would also like Nunu to be brought into line with Freljord aesthetics. Like, I want him to dress in a manner that suggests that he's from some kind of Freljord culture, which right now he's just wearing a parka with a hood, which is like nondescript. It really doesn't say anything. It doesn't place him culturally anywhere within the universe of League of Legends, and I would very much like them to change his face, because that's just lollipoppy levels of disturbing. For Nunu, for Willump himself, for the Yeti, him too, I would very much like to see him have a stronger sense of culture, and this is something they've already hinted at. That gif I talked about, the fist bump, we see that Willump has some kind of magical tattoo, some glowing tattoo anyway, on his arm that shows up through his fur, and that is what I would like to see, a cultural marking, something that places him as not just a savage Yeti with no connection to anything, who's just kind of an animal, but someone who has a culture of his own, who has a background of his own, who has some kind of, you know, a hidden depth to him, maybe perhaps a spirituality to him, like something like that, some deeper something that you can use to, I think that's someone's brakes, that you can use to explore the relationship between the two, where Willump is both, you know, the playful dog in the relationship, but also the more grown-up of the two, the one who protects, the one who takes care of Nunu when danger strikes, the one who stands in the way of danger, who takes the punches when need be, who's the tank of the relationship, essentially. Whereas Nunu himself is the more adventurous, the more outgoing, the more, let's run that way and see what happens, sort of the Finn and Jake relationship from Adventure Time is kind of, that's really what I'd like to see with Nunu, and it feels a lot like that's the direction that Riot is taking. Then we come to Ezreal. Now, Ezreal is a character who I've sort of, he's one of those characters who's just well designed enough, like his design works well enough, even in game, that it kind of doesn't need an update. And when I say that, I don't mean that they shouldn't do one. I say that it's a design that's just kind of, he's relatively generic, and he has this pretty boy anime aesthetic that's kind of timeless and that just kind of works no matter the context. And it's part of why Ezreal is actually quite a strong character design. At least he's strong in terms of longevity. Like, he's a character designer who I could see 4 or 5 more years in League of Legends, he could have fit into the game perfectly fine without looking out of place, because his character design is just fairly well put together and not really that out of place. But it's also very generic. Ezreal has never really had a strong aesthetic that identifies him with any of the regions in League of Legends, and that's slowly becoming a problem because, as we've discussed many times before, League of Legends is being organized increasingly around these specific regions with their own aesthetics, with their own histories, with their own internal conflicts, with their own internal stories that take place within them. And that's where we see a lot of the updates where characters have been associated much more strongly with certain regions in order to really make them fit into it, in order to really make them part of it. Like Irelia, for instance, had a very, very strong update in terms of making her much more part of that modern Ionian kind of, battle dancer aesthetic that she's got going on, whereas before she didn't really have a strong aesthetic connection to anywhere in League of Legends. She was just kind of vaguely anime-ish, sort of Asian-y. But with the update, she became much, much more grounded in sort of the design traditions that they have been establishing for Ionia. And that's an interesting problem with Ezreal, because Ezreal is not bound to any one region. He's an explorer. Now, what they're teasing in the specific artwork here is that they're going to connect him much more strongly with Shurima. This is apparently the new look of his glove, which is very much like you can really see the sun disk design in the middle of it there, and the gold and blue and the particular shape language of the glove places that much more as a Shuriman artifact, which is what it is. He found it in a Shuriman tomb. It used to belong to an Ascended who had a name that I forgot. Nick Crit has that in his video. He goes into that a lot more. But the glove itself, the thing that he's picked up, this artifact, belongs in Shurima, and he's picked it up because he's an explorer. He's a grave robber. Is another way of putting that, kind of like Indiana Jones and Lara Croft. And so he has picked that up and just made it part of himself, part of his kit. And the thing I would very much like to see with Ezreal, the thing I'd like to see them go into, is a more substantial exploration of this idea that Ezreal is a citizen of the world, that he's not tied to any one region, that he travels all over and he picks up stuff everywhere because he's a treasure hunter. That's what he does. So that he's a character design who wears a vest that he bought in Ionia. He's got some pants from Shurima, and he's got like these amulets and artifacts that he picked up in Noxus once upon a time when he was doing some undercover archaeological dig in one of their territories or something. And he's got these Freljord things in his hair that was given to him by some tribal chief in return for him bringing back a lost artifact of their people and something. Ezreal as a character who just incorporates all manner of disparate, weird influences from all over the world of League of Legends that just kind of fit together in this big eccentric collage that marks him out as someone who is intensely inquisitive, someone who's intensely curious about other cultures, about other societies, about, you know, things that he doesn't know about. He wants to discover things about new places. He wants to incorporate them into his own knowledge base, into his own aesthetic, into his own wardrobe, even. That's something that I'd really like to see. And Ezreal, who's just this complete, on the face of it, just this complete mismatch of different aesthetics from all over the League of Legends universe coming together to create one eccentric character. I don't mind him being a pretty boy. I think they should very much keep that, because that's kind of part of the fantasy of being that handsome, you know, young, dashing, daring world explorer thing. That's very much part of him. So I don't mind him being like a young, pretty boy, but I would like him to be more eccentric, more weird, a little bit more odd, because he is an odd person. He goes into ancient tombs and loots artifacts, which I would also be interested in seeing them maybe in his lore at some point deal with the issue that kind of comes with all archaeology of this type, that at some point you have to deal with the fact that you're robbing another culture of their stuff, like that. Yet you're going into another culture's home and being like, hey, this ancient thing that was made by your ancestors, that's mine now because it belongs in a museum in my homeland. Like that issue would be kind of nice if they had some stories that kind of went into why does Ezreal feel it's justified for him to go treasure hunting in, you know, the country. Like how does he think about it? How does he feel about what his mission is? Like, does he feel like, for instance, that he goes into Shuriman tombs and brings out Shuriman artifacts and then gives them to Shuriman people? That would be interesting. Like that he sees himself as this liberator of history, this person who finds forgotten history and brings it back to the people to whom it belonged. That would be a really interesting concept and a really interesting take. That would take him away from being just kind of a male Lara Croft, young Indiana Jones type thing, and turn him more into a crusader for justice kind of character, like someone who's trying to right an injustice or trying to empower people to understand their own history. Like, by the way, what's Ezreal's relationship with history? Like, is he a scholar type? Like, is he secretly kind of a nerd who just happens to be really good looking and also, you know, out hunting artifacts? Or is he more, he thinks it's fun to delve into the tombs. He thinks that, like, oh, ancient traps. Yes, I get to dodge around some stuff and fight some monsters. Cool, woohoo! Like, is he a thrill seeker? Or is he someone with an intellectual and scholarly interest? Or is he both? Like, both would also be an interesting. There's a lot of good stuff you can do with Ezreal that is kind of poorly explored in his old lore conception. Which leads us on to Kayle and Morgana. Now, we've talked about Kayle and Morgana on this channel before, so I'm going to be rehashing a couple of points that I made in previous videos. I believe it was in the top 10 worst character designs videos that I went over Morgana and all of the stuff that's wrong with her. So, in short, the you know, fallen angel and rising angel dynamic between them is good. Like, I really like that, this idea of, you know, sisters that are warring with each other over some very deeply held concept, where one embodies like one type of relationship to a critical concept and the other embodies the other one. And classically, Kayle has represented order. Like, she has been a representative of order itself, which also means control, which means repression in some cases, which means a lack of freedom, where Morgana, at least they seem to kind of be attempting to do that. Morgana representing more like rebellion against order, rebellion against that kind of tyranny, but also an embrace of powers that perhaps should not be embraced, like that perhaps are a little bit too dangerous to wield, so that there's a conflict there, like with, you know, do you value your security more than your freedom? like, where do you draw the line about those things, and do you value your personal freedom over, you know, collective freedom, stuff like that. Interesting themes around how personal freedom should be weighed against personal accomplishment. Like, all of that stuff would be very interesting stuff to explore. Unfortunately, because again, Morgana and Kayle are really old champions, they've had bugger all for lore updates for a very long time. None of that is probably explored, and none of that is really expressed, especially in their character designs. Now, Kayle actually has a rather good character design. The boob plates are... They added the boob plates. That kind of gets to me every time I see the splash art, is that Kayle didn't used to have these, but then they added them in an updated splash art. And it kind of sucks because everything else about this splash art fucking rules. Let's see if we can actually find it. It should be somewhere here. Is it on Universe, or do I have to go to Game Info in order to get a hold of it? Because I really do want to have a proper look at the splash art. There we are. Kayle's splash art, other than the boot plates, which are kind of dumb, it fucking rules. Like, I really, really love this conception of liquid gold magic as being how her, you know, invulnerability is visualized as this liquid shield of gold that surrounds her. From an aesthetic standpoint, that's really, really strong and powerful, especially because liquid often is associated with, like, tranquility and with, you know, with serenity, and indeed with order. Like, you'll see liquid a lot used as sort of a visual symbol for, you know, the tranquil lake, the tranquil sea, the well-ordered thing, whereas roiling seas and, you know, oceans spraying everywhere, that's usually a metaphor for chaos. And that kind of aesthetic, like bringing that whole liquid thing into her aesthetic, into how her aesthetic works, that's really fucking cool. I really hope that they keep that they really go with that Kayle is someone like who is placid as the ocean of a lake, but, you know, there's turbulence underneath, something like that. Those kinds of themes would be really interesting to explore with her. But mostly Kayle's design is really strong. Like, she's an embodiment of impersonal, you know, kind of almost a moral order, a moral justice, like justice without a human face, order without a human face, without emotion, without compassion. Whereas, you know, Morgana, unfortunately, it's not... She's a lady with her tits out. It's Morgana's character design is so bad. It's so weak because, as I've mentioned many times before, it doesn't really... I should really have brought up her splash art before. Where the heck is her game info? There. I should really have brought up their splash arts beforehand, come to think of it, because I'm going to be talking about them quite a bit. Morgana, by contrast, this really, like... So, Kayle being stuck in this hard, rigid armor, no human face. She's got these perfect, immaculate angel wings. Everything about her is immaculate. It's untouched. It's perfectly maintained. It's groomed. It's clean, right? So you would say the opposite of all that should be someone who's completely shattered, in tatters, who's corrupted, who's kind of torn apart, who's kind of, you know, maybe diseased, or, you know, who's missing limbs, whose clothes are all in disarray, who's not coherent in any way. Where Kayle is all about order and coherence, that they should be all about chaos and disorder. But it's not... That's not really... Like, she's sort of got broken wings-ish, but they don't really look broken so much as they look like she's been shedding for a long time. Like, they don't look like they've been ruined or destroyed. She doesn't look like she's someone... She doesn't look like the ruined, fallen, destroyed mirror image of her sister. She just looks like she took her clothes off and had some bad shedding on her wings, because even her dress down there is really well ordered. Like, it has all these nice patterns on it, and it's got this sort of organization to it. And then she's naked from the waist up and apparently not wearing any panties, because why? It doesn't, like, there's sort of an attempt at a juxtaposition there where Kayle is completely covered up, Morgana is much more uncovered, but it's like, this is also sexualized, which we know because she's got this strapless bra thing going on that really emphasizes her cleavage, which not really... Kayle isn't like repression of sexuality. That's not really... Again, it's much like we talked about Syndra in the What's the Deal with Syndra video, is it only makes sense to have a character be sexually liberated as a mirror to someone who's repressed if that repression has a sexual aspect to it as well. If Kayle's thing was also about you're not allowed to express your passions, you're not allowed to express your libido, you're not allowed to express your desires, then it would make sense for Morgana to be someone who's like, fuck you, I'll express all all the desire I fucking want. Come get me, boys. Let's have an orgy. Like, if that was the thing, then it would kind of make sense to have Morgana be sexy. But if that was the thing, then why is she wearing this, like, giant-ass, completely covering nun's skirt? Why isn't she running around in a G-string with pasties on her nipples? Like, you would have to go much harder on it. So the thing, much like I suggested with Syndra, is if you want something that embodies opposition to authority, one of the best visual aesthetics to pull from, like one of the best visual aesthetics, then one of the best visual shorthands that exist, is punk. Like, is punk aesthetics. Is, okay, let's, fuck tradition. Let's just wear, like, a leather vest and flannel in the same time, and also like jeans, but we've cut like the bottom half of the leg of one of the jeans leg off, and it's also fucking filthy because we don't wash it, because fuck the man, fuck mom and dad, fuck your parents, fuck, standards of living, fuck decency, fuck all of that. Like, punk would be the ideal aesthetic to draw from if you want something that's the opposite to Kayle's kind of cold, calculated, impersonal, institutionalized, orderly, kind of fascist orderliness. Then making Morgana punk would be the perfect antidote to that. But Morgana isn't punk. She's just kind of generic evil dark sorceress from like a 2002 fantasy comic that never went anywhere and was canceled by Image Comics. Like, she's not... Nothing about Morgana's character design tells me anything about who she is as a character except probably evil. She's got claws and she's kind of dark. And she's got some weird makeup going on. So she's probably evil, I guess. What does she want? I don't know. She wants to be evil. She wants to kill things. Like, because with Kayle, because you have the angel motif, because you have that reference to Christian mythology, okay, we understand that Kayle represents, the heavenly order of things, the heavenly spheres, that the order of angels, the order of God's command. Like, all of those visual references are in there, and they kind of inform what kind of character she is. And the facelessness, especially with the perspective that you see her from in the splash shot, by the way, she's above you, looking down on you, literally looking down on you, judging you. Kayle is all about judgment. That's very much part of her kit as well, and it's part of how her character is conceptualized. This is not the opposite of that. This doesn't really relate to that. They don't relate to each other. They don't really have a relationship. Even the purple and gold are sort of not really good as opposites. Like, I would go with brown as a better opposite to gold, actually. Not from a color theory perspective, but in terms of what the color communicates, where gold is valuable and pristine, and it communicates wealth, and it communicates, power and stuff like that. Brown is the color of dirt. It's the color of earth. It's the color of nature, and it's the color of freedom, and it's also the color of worthlessness, like of having no monetary value. Dirt has no monetary value, right? And that to me is more the opposite of gold. So I would, like, for Morgana, if you wanted to have something that was a polar opposite of what Kayle is, I would make her more of a dirty punk, like, and I mean dirty in the sense that she has nature imagery, like dirt imagery, like she's got, mud imagery going on. That's also something that's kind of already there with the tormented soil in her kit, like to play that angle up a little bit more and make her kind of a dirt mage, someone who slings mud at her enemies, literally. But, with the power of the earth infused into her, and a bit of a punk and a bit of a screw you, screw everybody. I don't care about monetary value, fuck your capitalism, like all that stuff would make for much better character directions for them to go. Unfortunately, that would mean a complete retooling of everything about Morgana, and I suspect that the League of Legends community would throw a little bit of a nutty if anybody dared to take their titties away. Or, like... By the way, here's another thing. Body types. Kayle and Morgana are both titty babes. Like, they're both Instagram model, big booty, big titties, kind of perfect, athletic Instagram model booty babes. And again, the thing is, you have this opportunity to create contrast between them, so why not give one of them a completely different body type to the other? Why not make Morgana fat? Like, she's not... Like, why not make her fat? Like, why is that not an option? Why not make Kayle fat for that instance? Or why not make Kayle like a big brick shithouse, just giant fucking buff muscle, like Ilaoi size, essentially. Whereas Morgana is this more wispy, waifish, very thin, very kind of small, frail looking, but using magical power and a sort of a spiritual power, where Kayle relies a lot more on physical force. Like those... There's so many opportunities to create a contrast, a difference between the two characters that Riot just... It's not there in their original designs because they're old and bad, but there's an opportunity to make them go in that direction. I hope they do. I hope they do. I don't have a lot of confidence that they will, but I hope they do. Oh, and by the way, Kayle and Morgana are going to be associated with Targon. We know this both because Aatrox has voice lines where he refers to Kayle and Morgana in terms of ascension, which ties them either to Targon or to Shurima. Probably more likely to Targon, given that this artwork right here has Kayle's sword and Morgana's chains against this gold, purple, dark, starry background. Like, and the stars, you know, the universe and space and all that stuff, that's very much Targon's area. So I suspect they're going to be more closely associated with Targon. And it kind of looks from this image that the juxtaposition is going to be with Kayle again representing more like the sunlight, the harsh light of the sun, and Morgana representing the soft light of the stars, or the darkness of, you know, the endless void of the stars. Not the void itself as the League entity, but the void of space, as it were. Which would be interesting because that might give them some interesting connections to like Leona and Diana, which might be fun to explore. So there's another thing that I'm kind of hoping for. And as for the last champion down here, like, I don't know. I can't really make any particular judgment based on this image alone. Like, we've got chains, which usually has something to do with, like, imprisonment, with entrapment, with holding people down. It might have a thing to do with slavery. And since they're placed in Demacia, well, okay, so this might be a character who's about highlighting how Demacia can, like, literally chain you down. Like, if they're a mage, for example. If they're a sorcerer of some kind that has literally been tied down or enslaved by Demacia, that might be an option. Necrit pointed out that he has seen these chains before. Like, he feels like he has seen this kind of chain before, somewhere in League of Legends art. And I feel like they look kind of similar to the chains in Alistar's splash art, like the chains that were tying him down in Noxus. But that's in Noxus and not in Demacia, so I don't know if that's just kind of a coincidence that he also has these square, spiky-looking chains. I don't really know. It's really hard to tell anything from this image, except, you know, the general associations with chains have to do with robbing people of their freedom, with tying them down, with holding them in place, and stuff like that. So perhaps that's the kind of champion that he's going to be. That's the kind of themes he's going to be exploring. Anyway, I think that's about all the speculation that I can wring out of the roadmap and all of the wishes and desires I have for the updates that are coming later on. I'm very optimistic about the Nunu update because literally anything would be an upgrade over what it once was, but I'm a little bit more worried about Morgana and Kayle. I'm worried that Riot are going to be too married to what the characters have been to do any radical reimagination of what the characters could be. So we'll see how that one turns out. Ezreal I'm also quite excited for. Anyway, as a last little note, I have a podcast with Riot Scarizard, or not Riot Scarizard, formerly of Riot, Patrick Scarizard Scarborough, who's now a full-time streamer who does a whole lot of game streaming and, you know, who brings his experience with game design into it. We've started a podcast where we sit around, we talk about video games, we talk about all kinds of other stuff that we enjoy. There's going to be a link to that down in the description, and also at the end of the video. I would very much appreciate it if you go and listen to it. He would appreciate it as well. And if you have any questions for us, any topics you'd like to suggest, we'd like you to leave those in the comments over there as well. You can also subscribe to it on SoundCloud. Once again, link down in the description. I want to plug it because it's something I've been really excited for. It's something I've spent a lot of time trying to get into the works, and now it's finally running, and I really want it to be a success. So, plugging that in the video. If you like this video, there's a like button down below. You can also subscribe and hit the bell icon if you want to actually see notified of the things that are happening. You can also comment on the video. That would be very nice. And if you don't like the video, there's a dislike button down below for that very purpose. But I should warn you that if you click the dislike button one too many times on my channel, an automatic message will go out to Riot, commanding them to do a rework of a champion you love and to fucking ruin it forever. Completely ruin it. Completely unplayable. All of the themes, just everything you liked about it, taken away forever for good. That is my curse upon you for daring to dislike any one of my videos. I am mostly kidding. Thank you very much for watching.